Hi there! If you're struggling with this topic, you're in the right place. What a beautiful city. The grass is green. The birds are singing. Everything seems peaceful and perfect. Their entire city depends on a giant underground water purification system. Every second, dirty water flows into the central flow system. Come with me and let's see how it works. At the center of the system is a heart-shaped purification chamber. Each section has a different job. Dirty water first enters the right atrium. Here, large debris and unwanted materials are filtered out. The water then moves into the right ventricle. This is where sedicles settle to the bottom. The remaining water is pumped to the purification center, also known as the lungs. The lungs clean and refresh the water before sending it back. The water-worthy pH is checked to make sure everything is safe. Next, the water enters the left ventricle. Once approved, the powerful left ventricle pumps the clean water back to every corner of the city. But none of this works without electricity. And that's where our hardworking hamster comes in. Now that we understand how the water city works, there's one important question. Who keeps the whole thing running?
Electricity. And in this city, electricity is made by a very hardworking hamster called the SA node hamster.
Most of the time, the SA node hamster is asleep. But unlike everybody else, it doesn't wait for someone to wake it up. When it wakes up and starts running, electricity is generated and sent to both atria. The atrial hamsters receive the signal, start running, and the atria contract, pushing water into the ventricles. The signal then reaches the AV node. Now, the AV node is a little dramatic. It pauses the signal for a moment before sending it forward. This short delay gives the ventricles enough time to fill properly. After that, the signal races down the bundle of His, through the bundle branches, and finally through the Purkinje fibers. Once the ventricular hamsters receive the signal, they start running too. The ventricles contract. Dirty water travels to the lungs, while clean water returns to the city.
The SA node normally runs the show at 60 to 100 beats per minute.
But what if it stops?
Thankfully, the heart has backup hamsters.
AV node can take over at 40 to 60 beats per minute.
If that fails, the bundle of His can generate impulses at about 40 to 60 beats per minute.
And if things become really desperate, the Purkinje system can step in at 25 to 40 beats per minute. Some cells create electricity. Others simply respond to it. And because of that, the heart has two different action potentials. Let's start with the slow action potential. This is the action potential used by pacemaker cells like the SA node and AV node.
Our SA node hamster is fast asleep inside its bubble.
The inside of the bubble is negative, sitting at about minus 70 millivolts. But then something interesting happens.
A special gate, called the funny current gate, opens.
Small sodium bubbles begin sneaking into the cell. Inside becomes less and less negative. The hamster is still asleep, but not for long.
A few calcium bubbles enter and push the voltage even higher.
The cell approaches its threshold of minus 40 millivolts. And the moment threshold is reached, the L-type calcium channels open, calcium rushes in, and the hamster starts running. Electricity is generated, the heartbeat begins, and our story is just getting started.
But the hamster can't run forever.
After a while, the calcium channels close. Then the potassium gates open. Potassium begins leaving the cell. As potassium leaves, the inside becomes negative again. The hamster starts slowing down. Eventually, the hamster stops running and falls right back asleep. Finally, the sodium-potassium pump restores balance. 3 sodium out, 2 potassium in. The bubble returns to minus 70 millivolts, and the hamster waits patiently to do it all over again. Now let's look at the exact same story on a graph. The graph starts at minus 70 millivolts. As sodium slowly enters through the funny current channels, the graph gradually rises upward. This slow rise is called the pacemaker potential. Next, the T-type calcium channels open, or temporary calcium gates, as I like to call them. The graph continues climbing toward threshold. Eventually, it reaches minus 40 millivolts. And the moment threshold is reached, everything changes. The L-type calcium channels open. The graph shoots upward. This is depolarization. After a while, the calcium channels close and potassium begins leaving the cell. The graph falls back down. This is repolarization. Eventually, the graph returns to minus 70 millivolts. Now we've seen how the pacemaker hamster creates electricity. But what happens when that electricity reaches the working heart cells? That's where the fast action potential comes in. Unlike the SA node hamster, the atrial and ventricular hamsters can't wake themselves up. They're asleep, comfortably asleep. Inside their bubbles, the voltage sits at about minus 90 millivolts. The inside stays negative thanks to potassium and other negative particles. So how do these hamsters wake up? Gap junctions. Think of them as tiny tunnels connecting neighboring cells together. When the SA node hamster generates electricity, extra positive ions flow directly through these tunnels. Slowly, the atrial cell becomes less negative. And once threshold is reached, everything happens very fast. The sodium gates burst open. Sodium rushes into the cell. the inside suddenly becomes positive, and the hamster jumps onto its wheel and starts running. This is depolarization. But sodium doesn't stay open for long. The sodium gates quickly become inactive. Then potassium gates open. Potassium begins leaving the cell. The voltage drops slightly, but the cell isn't finished yet. Next, the L-type calcium channels open. Calcium enters the cell while potassium continues leaving. One ion comes in, one ion goes out. The result? A plateau. The voltage stays almost flat for a while. And this plateau is what makes cardiac muscles special. Because while calcium is entering the cell, it does something important. It touches the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And the sarcoplasmic reticulum responds by releasing even more calcium. And this calcium is what actually makes the muscle contract. The atrial hamster chamber squeezes, and water moves forward. After a while, the calcium channels close, but potassium continues leaving the cell. The inside becomes more and more negative. The hamster slows down, the hamster stops running, and the cell returns to its resting state. Finally, the sodium-potassium pump gets to work. It pumps 3 sodium ions out of the cell and brings 2 potassium ions back in. The original balance is restored, and the membrane returns to -90 millivolts. The hamster is asleep again. Now let's see the same process on a graph. The graph begins at -90 millivolts. Positive ions arrive through the gap junctions. The membrane gradually moves toward threshold. Eventually, threshold is reached. The fast sodium channels open. Sodium rushes into the cell, and the graph shoots sharply upward. This is depolarization. The sodium channels become inactive. A small amount of potassium leaves the cell, creating a tiny notch on the graph. Next, the L-type calcium channels open. Calcium enters while potassium continues leaving. The graph enters its plateau phase. This plateau is what makes cardiac muscle unique. Eventually, the calcium channels close, potassium takes over, and the graph falls back down. The membrane returns to -90 millivolts, ready to do it all over again.